Mara Hendricks pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the communications deck window, staring at the flickering storms of Veridian Prime below. The planet's atmosphere boiled with angry reds and purples, lightning streaking through thick clouds like the veins of some great, unseen creature. Her stomach tightened as the alarms blared softly around her, warning of the Clith approach. The colony below, their home, their families, their friends, was under attack, and they were nearly out of time. For days, the human colonists had held out, but the swarm of Clith ships had grown too large, too fast. They struck with relentless precision, tearing apart outposts, smashing supply depots, and forcing civilians into hastily dug shelters. Mara's team had been monitoring the battle, relaying reports to the higher command, but there was little they could do from this small orbital station. The colony's own defensive fleet was limited, barely enough to slow the Clith's advance. It seemed almost certain that the signal Mara now typed into the console, an SOS, would be their last desperate plea. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. The SOS wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of human desperation. She glanced at Lieutenant Harris, who was hunched over his terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes wide with worry. "It's done," Mara said quietly. "It's sent. They're far from human space. If they get this, it'll be a miracle." The Deathworlders were a species famed across the galaxy for surviving planets that could kill a human in minutes, worlds with acid rains, crushing gravity, or magnetic storms that tore ships apart. They were ruthless, they were powerful, and they had a code that was impossible for humans to understand. Many thought them cold, distant, and uninterested in the troubles of lesser species. So when the signal left the comm arrays, there was a tense silence. The alarms continued their dull hum, the Clith swarm moved closer to the colony's main city, and Mara could almost hear the heartbeat of the entire human settlement below in the trembling of the station's metal hull. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. Then, as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath, the monitors flickered. A new signature appeared in the system, an enormous fleet emerging from beyond known space. Mara froze. "Harris, do you see that?" They moved with a precision and confidence that made Mara's jaw tighten. Each vessel was armored in dark metal, bristling with strange arrays of weapons that glowed with unfamiliar energy. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Clith swarm had already noticed them, diverting a portion of its force, but they didn't retreat. They hesitated, as though sensing something far stronger than themselves. The comm system cracked with a voice, low and rumbling, carrying across the void. "Humans, you fight. We join." The words were simple, direct, with no hint of threat, no negotiation, no demand. Yet they made Mara's heart race. They're coming to fight with us," Harris stammered. Mara swallowed. "It seems that way." But even as she said it, a small, nagging part of her mind whispered caution. Humans often misunderstood intentions. The Deathworlders didn't give aid because someone asked. They acted according to strength, respect, and survival. Mara's pulse quickened. If they judged humans unworthy, if they saw weakness, then they would not join. They might even strike. Below, the Clith swarm began another attack, skimming the planet's surface, burning fields, and flattening buildings. Mara watched through the viewport as plasma streams lit the skies and small explosions scattered across the colony. The human defensive forces responded, firing missiles and energy cannons, but it was clear they were vastly outnumbered. Suddenly, the Deathworlder ships shifted formation. Massive shields ignited around their hulls, glowing in a dark orange hue that lit up the surrounding space. Energy beams lanced out from their weapons, striking Clith ships before they could even fire properly. Mara leaned forward, her face pressed close to the glass. They're destroying them before they even reach the city. And the Deathworlders, powerful though they were, would expect humans to fight alongside them. This wasn't a rescue mission, it was a test. Mara's eyes flicked to the holographic map of the colony. Smoke rose from the main city, the hospitals and shelters marked by blinking red icons. Civilians were trapped in the lower levels. Rescue efforts were ongoing, but even with the Deathworlders' firepower, the humans would have to act quickly. She tapped her communicator. "All units, evacuate civilians to shelters and hold your positions. The fleet is here. Fight alongside them, follow their lead, and stay alive." The human soldiers, the engineers, the medics, everyone would have to coordinate with beings they had only heard about in stories, beings who could crush human ships as easily as toys. Mara turned back to the viewport, watching as one of the Deathworlder commanders emerged from a ship in a smaller, sleek craft. It hovered silently near the colony's orbital station. The figure was imposing, taller than a human, armored in plates that shimmered with faint light, and its eyes glowed with a strange, intelligent brilliance. The craft's energy field pulsed gently, and it was clear it had scanned the station. The figure raised one massive hand, and the voice returned in the same deep tone, now directed specifically at the station. "Humans, lead the way. Show us your strength." She had trained for crises, for simulations, but nothing had prepared her for this, leading humans alongside beings who could wipe out entire armies without hesitation. "All right," she whispered to herself. "We can do this. We will do this." Harris worked alongside her, relaying commands to scattered units. Slowly, the humans began to adapt to the presence of the Deathworlders, moving confidently, trusting the alien warrior's judgment, but also asserting their own ingenuity. Mara's eyes darted to the Clith swarm, now regrouping after their first losses. They had learned quickly, redirecting some forces towards secondary targets, probing weak points in the colony's defenses. A small detachment of human ships engaged them, and for a moment, Mara held her breath as one of the Deathworlder vessels swooped in, obliterating a Clith destroyer with a single shot. The sheer power of the fleet was awe-inspiring, yet it demanded more from the humans. Passive observers would not survive. Only those who acted would earn the Deathworlders' respect. A sharp alarm interrupted her thoughts. The Clith had deployed a strike team toward the main city, moving under the cover of a storm. Mara grabbed her console, plotting an intercept. "Harris, get a team together. We're hitting them before they reach the shelters." Now, it was a gamble, a test of human will, of courage under fire, and of the ability to act in concert with beings far beyond their comprehension. As the first human strike team launched toward the incoming Clith units, Mara took one last look at the approaching Deathworlder fleet. She realized, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that humans were about to discover something extraordinary. When allies came from worlds that could kill them in an instant, they did not merely survive. They learned what it meant to be truly alive. And above all, Mara understood that humanity's story was just beginning. The SOS had not merely called for help. It had awakened a force that would challenge everything humans thought they knew about strength, courage, and the stars themselves. The Deathworlder fleet moved with an almost living precision, each ship weaving through the storm clouds of Viridian Prime like predators circling a vast, dangerous prey. Mara Hendricks watched through the viewport, awe and tension coiling in her chest. The Clith swarm, once unstoppable, now seemed cautious. Every strike they attempted was intercepted with terrifying efficiency. Still, Mara knew the battle was far from over. "Commander Hendricks," Lieutenant Harris called, his voice tense over the comms. "The Clith are adjusting. They're sending smaller units to flank the city. Some of our defenses are already overwhelmed. Work with us." Mara keyed her communicator. "All units engage, protect civilians at all costs." The sound of explosions echoed faintly even across space, vibrations trembling through the hull. Mara could feel the humans, their mixture of fear and excitement. Even trained soldiers couldn't hide the widening eyes and quickened breaths. The Deathworlders were unstoppable, but Mara knew something crucial. The humans had to act. Passive witnesses would earn nothing. Harris spoke again. "Commander, the Clith are regrouping. They're coordinating now, adapting to the Deathworlder attacks. We move fast or we lose civilians." Below, the city spread out like a wounded giant, smoke rising from scorched buildings, sirens screaming from every corner. The first encounter was brutal. Clith drones swarmed the streets, firing with lightning speed. Mara's team weaved through the debris, returning fire with energy rifles and improvised explosives. Above them, Deathworlder warriors descended in smaller assault crafts, their weapons firing with deadly accuracy. Every shot, every movement seemed synchronized perfectly with the humans' actions, as if the fleet had already learned their patterns. Mara ducked behind a fallen column, shouting orders over the comms. "Team Alpha, flank left. Use the rubble for cover." A squad of Clith attempted to bypass the human defense line, heading straight for a group of civilians trapped near a partially collapsed hospital. Mara's pulse jumped. "Lynn, intercept," she yelled. The humans charged, using their small size and speed to confuse the larger Clith. Explosions erupted around them, and Mara ducked just as a blast threw rubble across the street. Then a Deathworlder ship appeared overhead, its energy beams slicing through a cluster of Clith drones, clearing a path. Mara's team reached the civilians and began moving them to safer ground. The humans' actions were precise, calculated, and brave, and Mara realized something crucial. The Deathworlders were not just judging raw strength. They were judging human initiative, courage, and intelligence in combat. Hours passed in a blur of fire and noise. Mara coordinated attacks from both ground and orbital forces, guiding her soldiers while communicating with the Deathworlder fleet. Slowly, the Clith swarm began to falter. Every time they adapted, humans and Deathworlders adapted faster, forming a partnership that neither species had expected. "Commander Hendricks," Harris' voice crackled over the comms. "The civilians are safe for now, but the Clith aren't done. They're regrouping, and there's something bigger coming." "What do you mean?" Their ships shifted formation instantly, energy shields expanding, weapons charging. The commander, Rylock, appeared again on the viewport, towering and calm. "Humans," his voice rumbled, "prepare yourselves. Show me your courage." The dreadnought emerged fully from the clouds, a massive spiked vessel bristling with weapons and shield generators. Its shadow fell across the city like a dark storm, and Mara felt the sheer weight of its presence. The Clith swarm accompanying it surged forward, confident, ruthless, and organized. Mara's mind raced. There was no time for hesitation. She quickly coordinated a plan, calling human teams to act as lures and distractions, while Deathworlder firepower would strike from the flanks. It was risky, but humans had something the Clith did not: ingenuity. The first phase of the attack began. Mara led her strike team in a daring maneuver, diving between buildings, dodging Clith fire, and planting explosives at strategic points. Above, Deathworlder ships rained energy beams onto the dreadnought's defenses, drawing its attention upward and away from the humans. Mara's team moved like shadows, quick, silent, and precise. As they reached the core of the targeted Clith units, explosions erupted, shaking the city streets. Mara ducked behind a toppled wall, heart hammering. "Push forward, we've got them," she shouted. The humans surged, taking advantage of the confusion, their bravery unmatched. The Deathworlders above were relentless. Mara watched as one of the massive ships fired a concentrated beam, cutting through a Clith cruiser with terrifying precision. Even the humans were awed, but no one stopped moving. It was their chance, their moment to prove they belonged in the fight. Minutes stretched like hours. Mara's team faced relentless attacks, but they adapted, dodging, strategizing, and striking with deadly efficiency. Harris covered her flank, taking out Clith drones that threatened the civilians. The Deathworlders adjusted their positions in perfect sync with human movements, forming a deadly dance of power and skill. Finally, the first wave of the dreadnought's escorts collapsed under the combined force. Mara's team cheered silently, adrenaline surging. They had done it. They had faced the swarm, survived, and kept civilians safe. The Deathworlders observed quietly, their expressions inscrutable, yet Mara felt a shift, an acknowledgement of respect. Rylock's voice returned, calm and powerful. "You fight well. Your courage and strategy are noted." They were no longer just desperate victims. They were active participants, partners in a fight that spanned species and stars. The Deathworlders shifted again, preparing for the next engagement. Mara realized that humans would have to continue proving themselves, not just in strength, but in intelligence, courage, and initiative. And somehow she felt a spark of hope. If humans could survive this, if they could earn the respect of beings who had thrived on the deadliest worlds in the galaxy, perhaps there was no limit to what they could achieve. Harris glanced at her, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Commander, we might actually survive this." "We're not just surviving," she said, Harris. "We're showing them who humans really are." Humanity was standing, fighting, and showing that even against impossible odds, they could rise. And in the dark void above Viridian Prime, among the flashing lights of battleships and alien weapons, Mara understood one truth clearly. Humans would not just survive, they would thrive, and the Deathworlders had just taken notice. The Clith dreadnought hung in orbit like a dark, jagged mountain, its weapons charging, shields shimmering with a violent orange glow. Mara Hendricks watched through the viewport as the city below shuddered from the occasional Clith strike. She could feel the trembling of the orbital station beneath her feet, a constant reminder that even up here, humans were fragile. And yet, for the first time, she did not feel powerless. The Deathworlders had arrived, and humans were no longer alone. "Commander," Lieutenant Harris said, pointing at the tactical display, "the dreadnought is coordinating with the swarm. They're using human patterns to predict our movements. If we don't act fast, it will break our defenses. We make them adapt to us, not the other way around." She tapped the console, plotting a course for a combined assault. Harris, alert all strike teams. We're going to split the swarm, lure them into traps, and hit them from multiple angles. Deathworlders provide cover fire. Each maneuver was calculated, yet fluid, almost like a living organism responding to threats. Mara's first mission team dropped into the lower city to intercept a Clith detachment attempting to break through toward the civilian shelters. Sergeant Lin led a group of engineers and medics, using their knowledge of the city to set ambush points. Mara followed, her energy rifle ready. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the stench of scorched metal. Explosions shook the ground around them, but she moved steadily forward, directing her team. "Remember," she said quietly, "we're not just fighting to survive. We're showing the Deathworlders that humans can think, adapt, and fight alongside them. Follow the plan, but don't be afraid to improvise." Above, the Deathworlders unleashed a synchronized barrage. Mara watched as beams of orange energy tore through clusters of Clith ships, vaporizing them before they could even react. Yet Mara knew the swarm was learning, adapting. Every time humans struck from a new position, the Clith changed tactics. It was a deadly game of chess, and Mara had to stay 3 moves ahead. A sudden vibration shook the street. Mara ducked just as a Clith plasma bolt struck the ground where she had been standing moments before. She glanced at Lin. "Keep moving, don't let them pin us down." "Target that group on the south bridge," he shouted. Mara saw a wave of Clith drones moving to flank them. In response, Deathworlder cruisers fired, disintegrating most of the attackers before they could close the distance. For a moment, there was a strange calm amid the chaos. Mara realized that humans and Deathworlders were beginning to understand each other. Humans took initiative, showing courage and strategy. Deathworlders adapted instantly, amplifying human actions with their overwhelming power. This was no longer a rescue, it was a partnership forged in the heat of battle. Mara moved toward the civilian shelters, signaling teams to escort survivors. Children and elderly huddled in fear, their faces pale from smoke and terror. Mara knelt beside them. "You're safe now," she said, voice steady despite the roar of battle. "We're here to protect you. Stay close and follow instructions." The Dreadnought's presence loomed overhead, a constant threat that made even the Deathworlders tense. Harris' voice crackled again. "Commander, the Dreadnought is preparing a massive strike. Its shields are almost impenetrable. If it fires, it could level the entire sector. We'll hit it from the west with the Deathworlder heavy cruisers. Move fast, stay alive." The tension was almost unbearable, every heartbeat a reminder of how thin the line between survival and annihilation could be. Above, the Deathworlders executed the plan flawlessly. Massive beams of energy struck the Dreadnought's flank, drawing its attention upward. Mara's team surged forward, detonating charges that disabled several of its external weapons. The Dreadnought shuddered, its shields flickering under the combined assault. Mara's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, but the Clith were relentless. Small attack ships darted through the streets, attempting to cut off human teams. Mara fired rapidly, covering her teammates, and felt a strange sense of clarity. The humans were no longer victims. They were fighters, thinkers, and partners in a battle that spanned species. "Commander, civilians are clear," Harris shouted. "Deathworlders have the swarm engaged. You have a window." The ground shook violently, and Mara barely kept her balance. The massive ship wobbled, its shields sparking and failing in sections. From above, a Deathworlder cruiser dove toward the Dreadnought, its energy cannons firing continuously. Mara watched in awe as massive beams tore through reinforced hulls, opening gaping holes in the enemy vessel. The Clith Dreadnought roared in a soundless, terrifying fury, but the combined force of humans and Deathworlders was relentless. Mara saw Lin struggling against a Clith squadron, and she moved to assist. Together, they pushed back the attackers, covering each other's flanks, their teamwork a reflection of the new bond forming between species. The Deathworlders watching this did not interfere unnecessarily. They allowed humans to act, proving themselves capable, and in return, humans adapted quickly, showing strategy and courage. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the Dreadnought staggered, systems failing under the combined assault. Mara felt a rush of hope. "Keep pushing, we're almost there," she shouted. The final strike came from both sides. Deathworlder heavy cruisers fired energy beams in perfect synchronization with human charges detonating across the surface. The Dreadnought shuddered violently, and with a tremendous explosion began to break apart, debris scattering across the orbit. Mara and her team ducked instinctively, then looked up as the massive ship fell into the planet's atmosphere, disintegrating before it could reach the city. For a moment there was silence. The Clith swarm, witnessing the destruction of their dreadnought, faltered and began retreating, their formations breaking apart. Mara exhaled, the tension draining from her body. Around her, humans and Deathworlders alike observed the result of their combined effort. Rylok's voice came through the comms again, deep and resonant. "Humans, you have shown courage, strategy, and adaptability. Your actions are noted. Continue to survive, and you may yet walk among the stars as equals." They had not just endured, they had fought, and the Deathworlders had recognized it. For the first time, she saw the truth of what humans could achieve when courage and intelligence were combined with sheer determination. Harris let out a laugh of disbelief. "Commander, we actually did it. We held the line. The swarm may retreat, but this battle is far from over. We've earned respect, but we have to keep proving ourselves." Humanity was no longer waiting for help. Humanity was fighting, surviving, and earning recognition in a galaxy that often underestimated them. And Mara knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. The Clith would return, stronger and smarter, but humans and Deathworlders together had already shown what could be achieved. Humanity's courage, ingenuity, and adaptability were their greatest weapons, and now, even among the most fearsome beings in the galaxy, that truth was undeniable. Mara turned to her team, energy rifle resting at her side. "We move forward. We rebuild. And when the next wave comes, we will be ready." It had not only called for help, it had awakened something far greater, a partnership, a respect, and a recognition of humanity's true strength. Above Viridian Prime, the storm clouds swirled, but for the first time in days, Mara felt a glimmer of calm. Humanity had survived, humans had fought, and together with the Deathworlders, they had turned the tide of battle. The war was far from over, but the message was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. And somewhere deep in the void of space, where alien fleets moved silently among the stars, the Clith would remember the day humans and Deathworlders fought side by side, and how terrifyingly capable humanity had become. The Clith swarm had retreated, but the city below Viridian Prime was scarred and smoldering. Mara Hendricks stood on the communications deck, scanning the horizon. Fires still raged across districts, and clouds of dust and smoke blurred the skyline. The battle had been won for now, but victory felt hollow. The humans had survived, yes, but they had learned the hard truth. The Clith would return, and they would be stronger and smarter. Lieutenant Harris approached, wiping soot from his brow. "Commander, the fleet suggests we prepare for the next wave. They say it will be unlike anything we've faced." "You mean the hazards of Viridian Prime?" "Effective, perhaps. We will follow your lead, but execution must be precise. Fail, and the swarm will destroy everything." One team would navigate the unstable canyons to lure part of the Clith swarm into a trap. Another would control energy amplifiers near volcanic vents, and a third would create magnetic interference fields to confuse Clith sensors. Mara herself led a small strike team, responsible for coordinating the traps and ensuring the civilians were kept safe. The first phase began at dawn, though the sun was barely visible through the thick storm clouds. Mara's team moved swiftly, using the ruins of the city as cover. Every corner could hide danger, every shadow a threat. As they advanced, Mara could hear faint energy pulses from Clith drones probing the area, searching for weaknesses. "Team Alpha, set charges here," Mara instructed, pointing to a series of rock formations that jutted above a canyon. "We'll trigger them when the swarm enters. Make sure the detonators are synced with the magnetic pulses." Mara could feel the power radiating from the massive ships. They were beyond human comprehension in strength, yet they moved in concert with her plan, amplifying its effectiveness. "Commander," Harris' voice crackled over the comms, "Clith scouts approaching the canyon. They're moving faster than predicted. Trigger the traps at my mark." Mara's team moved swiftly through the chaos, eliminating disoriented drones and ensuring the path for Deathworlder strikes remained clear. From above, massive energy beams raked through the trapped swarm, decimating their numbers. Mara couldn't help but glance at the Deathworlders. Even in the midst of destruction, there was a strange elegance in the way they fought. Every shot, every maneuver seemed calculated, yet fluid. Hours passed in relentless bursts of action. The humans adapted to the chaos, setting new traps, improvising strategies, and taking calculated risks. Mara led a strike team through the volcanic vents, using heat and pressure to create additional hazards for the cliff. The humans' ingenuity complemented the Deathworlders' overwhelming power, forming a force greater than the sum of its parts. "Commander, another wave is approaching," Harris warned. "This one is larger with more coordinated attacks. The Dreadnought's allies are regrouping. Use the canyon traps again and deploy additional charges near the vent fields. Make sure the Deathworlders cover the city while we lead the swarm into our controlled zones." Every human action had a purpose, and the Deathworlders adjusted instantly, striking with devastating accuracy. Mara caught sight of a Clith dreadnought attempting to break through the canyon's defenses. She signaled her team to focus fire while coordinating with orbital support. Massive energy beams from the Deathworlder fleet tore through the dreadnought's hull, but it continued to advance, its shields resilient and powerful. "Keep pressure on it," Mara shouted. "We have to force it into the vents." The heat and pressure destabilized its shields, making it vulnerable to concentrated fire from the Deathworlder fleet. Mara's team advanced, ensuring the Clith could not escape the trap. The dreadnought staggered, but it was far from destroyed. Mara realized that this was a test of endurance and strategy. The humans could not rely solely on firepower, they had to outthink the enemy. She moved her team swiftly, setting additional charges and creating choke points that funneled the remaining Clith into vulnerable positions. Hours turned into a day-long battle. Mara coordinated constantly, adjusting plans on the fly, improvising as new threats emerged. She could see her team's fatigue, yet their determination never wavered. Humans were proving themselves capable in ways even the Deathworlders respected. Finally, the combined assault reached its climax. The dreadnought and the remaining Clith forces were funneled into the canyon traps. Explosions and volcanic eruptions tore through the enemy formation, while the Deathworlders delivered precise, devastating strikes from orbit. Mara watched as the last Clith drones fell, their energy discharges fading into the storm clouds above. Silence descended for a brief moment. Mara exhaled, exhausted but exhilarated. They had done it. The Clith were defeated, at least for now. The city had survived, and humans had proven themselves capable of strategic brilliance and courage under fire. Rylok's voice came through the comms, calm and resonant. "Humans, your ingenuity and courage are noted. You have proven yourselves worthy partners. Continue to act with the same resolve, and you may yet walk among the stars as equals." Harris approached, wiping soot and sweat from his brow. "Commander, we actually did it. We used the planet itself to win. Every step we take now builds our strength for the next battle." She noticed a change in the humans around her. They were no longer frightened, disorganized victims. They were fighters, leaders, and strategists, capable of working alongside the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Even the Deathworlders seemed to acknowledge this change. Their formations shifted to provide protection without micromanaging human actions. Mara understood the unspoken approval. Humans had earned their place on the battlefield, and they had proven that courage, ingenuity, and adaptability were as valuable as raw power. As night fell over Viridian Prime, the city below glowed with fires and lights, evidence of survival and resilience. Mara stood on the communications deck, looking out at the horizon where the storm clouds churned and the last Clith drones had vanished. She felt a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and determination. Humanity had survived, and they had shown that they could not only endure but thrive under the most extreme conditions. She turned to Harris. "We keep moving forward. The Clith will return, and when they do, we'll be ready. Humans and Deathworlders together can face anything." They were a constant reminder of the partnership that had formed, the respect that had been earned, and the battles yet to come. She knew the next challenge would be greater, more dangerous, and perhaps even more unpredictable. But she also knew something else. Humans had proven that when courage, ingenuity, and determination combined, nothing, not even the most fearsome alien swarm, could break them. And as the fires of the city burned brightly against the dark storm clouds, Mara Hendricks understood the true power of humanity. They had survived the impossible, earned the respect of a legendary species, and shown that even in the most dire circumstances, humans could rise. The Clith would return, stronger and smarter, but Mara was ready. Humanity had shown that they could fight, think, and survive in ways that no one, not even the Deathworlders, had fully anticipated. And in that moment, Mara knew one undeniable truth. Humans were no longer victims of the galaxy. They were warriors, strategists, and survivors. They were worthy. And above all, they were not alone. The sky over Veridian Prime burned with the aftermath of the recent battles. Fires still flickered across the city, and smoke twisted in the wind like restless spirits. Mara Hendricks stood on the communications deck of the orbital station, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the Deathworlder fleet hovered. The Clith swarm had retreated, but Mara knew it was only temporary. Their true force had yet to arrive. Lieutenant Harris joined her, his face lined with exhaustion. "Commander, sensors are picking up something massive, not just a swarm this time. They're bringing reinforcements, something bigger than anything we've faced before. This time, it's the final wave." Humans had learned to fight with the environment as an ally, and now they would need every advantage. The first signs of the approaching Clith were subtle. Scanners detected faint energy signatures deep in the upper atmosphere. Mara watched the displays with a mix of anticipation and tension. The swarm moved with terrifying coordination, hundreds of ships moving like a single organism. At their center, a massive dreadnought loomed, larger and more heavily armed than the last. Its hull was reinforced with materials that even the Deathworlders paused to study, and its energy shields pulsed with deadly power. Harris broke the silence. "Commander, it's enormous. Its firepower, even with the fleet, this could destroy the city in minutes." "Then we make every minute count. Humans, Deathworlders, we fight together. Every move must be precise, every attack calculated. We do not falter." Mara could feel the overwhelming power of their presence. It was awe-inspiring, yet she knew humans had a role to play beyond being shields and support. "Commander Hendricks," Rylok's voice rumbled over the comms, "we will follow your plan. Show us your strength." "Then let's get to work." The air was thick with smoke and heat, and every step was a calculated risk. "Team Alpha," she shouted, "positions, we trigger the vents on my mark. Stay low and keep moving." She signaled, and the vents erupted, sending molten rock and superheated steam into the path of the Clith. The swarm staggered, some ships caught in the eruption, others forced into narrow canyons where Deathworlder fire awaited. From orbit, beams of orange energy cut through the enemy ranks with terrifying precision. Mara watched as Deathworlder cruisers fired in perfect coordination with human detonations, amplifying the damage and keeping the swarm off balance. "Commander," Harris reported, "the dreadnought is focusing on the canyon. Its shields are strong, but the traps are slowing it. We've got a chance to strike its weak points." Strike teams Alpha and Beta target the dorsal shields. Humans focus on precision strikes. Deathworlders cover all flanks and ensure no ship escapes. Mara herself planted a series of charges along the dreadnought's dorsal surface, using the volcanic heat to destabilize its shields further. The Clith responded fiercely. Smaller attack ships swarmed the canyon, attempting to intercept human teams. Mara fired rapidly, coordinating with Lin and the other squad leaders. Together they held the line, buying precious time for the larger strategic plan to unfold. Above, the Deathworlders unleashed a synchronized barrage on the dreadnought. Energy beams lanced through the reinforced hull, striking weak points Mara's team had identified. The dreadnought shuddered, sparks and debris falling into the planet's atmosphere. Mara felt a surge of hope. They were making progress, but the Clith were relentless. Another wave of drones targeted the human strike teams directly. Mara ducked behind a rock formation, her rifle blasting a rapid sequence of shots. Lin covered her flank, coordinating with engineers to detonate traps that sent drones flying. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. Hours passed in a blur of fire, smoke, and adrenaline. Mara's team moved between traps, detonating charges, luring drones, and coordinating with orbital support. Every human action was amplified by the Deathworlders' power. The combined force was unstoppable, yet Mara knew the final strike would require something extraordinary. "Commander," Harris said, urgency in his voice, "the dreadnought's shields are flickering. This is our moment." Mara planted the final charges, setting timers to detonate simultaneously with Deathworlder energy beams. The Clith dreadnought roared in a soundless, terrifying fury, firing its massive cannons at anything that moved. Then Mara gave the signal. Explosions erupted along the dorsal surface, molten rock and ash clouded the canyon, and the Deathworlder fleet fired in perfect unison. The dreadnought shuddered violently, sparks and energy discharges cascading across its hull. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a tremendous explosion, the dreadnought's core was destabilized. It began to collapse inward, debris scattering into orbit. The remaining Clith forces faltered, disorganized and retreating under the relentless human and Deathworlder assault. Mara dropped to her knees, breathing heavily, her rifle smoking in her hands. Around her, humans cheered, their exhaustion mixed with exhilaration. Civilians emerged from shelters, faces pale but alive, witnessing the final moments of the battle from a safe distance. Rylok's voice echoed over the comms, resonant and approving. "Humans, you have shown courage, strategy, and ingenuity. Your species is stronger than anticipated. You have earned our respect. Humanity held the line, and the swarm is retreating." Fires still flickered, smoke twisted into the sky, yet the humans had endured. They had survived against impossible odds, learned to fight in coordination with a species stronger and older than themselves, and proven that courage and ingenuity could match raw power. The Deathworlder fleet hovered silently, their presence a shield and a testament to the partnership formed in battle. Mara understood the unspoken message. Humans had not only survived, they had earned recognition, respect, and a place in the galaxy's greater story. As night fell over Viridian Prime, Mara walked among the survivors and soldiers, offering words of encouragement and ensuring everyone was accounted for. She saw determination in their eyes, a new confidence born from shared struggle and victory. Humans were no longer fragile, fearful, or helpless. They were warriors, strategists, and survivors. Harris joined her, his expression reflective. "Commander, we've changed. Humans have changed. We're not just waiting for help anymore. We can stand and fight side by side with beings like the Deathworlders. Today, we didn't just survive. We proved that humans can rise above the impossible. We've shown that courage, intelligence, and determination are our greatest weapons. And now, we continue. We rebuild, we strengthen, and we prepare for the future." Humanity had earned a place in the stars, had shown strength and adaptability that could match even the galaxy's most formidable forces. And somewhere deep in the void of space, where alien fleets moved silently, the Clith would remember the humans of Viridian Prime, not as victims, not as prey, but as a species capable of courage, strategy, and resilience that could stand alongside the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. Mara took a deep breath, looking at the stars above. For the first time in days, she felt a true sense of peace. The battle was over, the city was safe, and humans had shown the galaxy their worth. The SOS that had called for help had done more than summon allies. It had awakened the full potential of humanity, proving that they could face the impossible and emerge victorious. As the first rays of a new sun broke through the storm clouds, illuminating the battered city and the fleet hovering above, Mara Hendricks understood something undeniable. Humans had survived the impossible, earned the respect of a legendary species, and proved that when courage, ingenuity, and will combined, nothing, not even the deadliest alien swarm, could stop them. And humanity's story was just beginning.